I bet you didn't know how crucial sleep systems have been in the harshest conditions. Before we dive in, make sure to like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss out. Most people today, tend to think of sleep in the field as just a comfort problem. Temperature ratings, pack size, soft liners, maybe a bivy sack if things get rough, those are the concerns. But during the World Wars, sleep wasn't about comfort at all. It was, in fact, about survival under artillery fire, in flooded trenches, bombed-out cities, frozen forests, and scorched deserts where shelter was, unreliable or even non-existent. Soldiers were expected to function after nights spent on mud, rubble, frozen earth, or bare rock. If their sleep system failed, it wasn't merely inconvenient. It was, quite frankly, fatal. World War armies learned very quickly that fragile gear simply had no place on an active front. Equipment had to survive weeks of abuse without any resupply, maintenance facilities, or replacement. Sleep systems were treated just the same way as weapons and boots. If it could rot, tear, clog, or silently fail in wet or cold conditions, it was, without hesitation, rejected. This brutal reality shaped some of the most durable field sleeping concepts ever issued to soldiers, many of which, I must say, modern survivalists still overlook. Why did early 20th century battlefields punish modern comfort ideas? Well, the environments of World War I and II were absolutely merciless. On the Western Front, soldiers slept in trenches that filled with water and filth. In Eastern Europe, troops endured deep snow and sub-zero temperatures for months at a time. In North Africa, cold desert nights followed scorching days. There were no tents for most frontline troops, and fires were often forbidden due to visibility and smoke. Lightweight sleeping bags, especially those relying on delicate insulation, simply did not survive these conditions. Moisture was, more often than not, unavoidable. Rain, snow, sweat and condensation soaked everything. Once insulation collapsed, it stayed collapsed. Soldiers needed sleep systems that continued to work when damp, compressed, filthy and frozen. This reality pushed militaries toward dense natural materials and modular bedroll systems rather than single, specialized sleeping bags. Now, let's talk about how wool and canvas became the backbone of wartime sleep systems. Across both world wars, armies, independently arrived at rather similar solutions. Thick wool blankets, paired with heavy canvas ground sheets, became standard issue in many forces. British, German, Soviet, and even American units relied heavily on wool for insulation. Not because it was comfortable, but, because it was reliable. Wool, interestingly enough, continues to insulate even when wet. It also resists flame and sparks from artillery and camp stoves. Importantly, it does not melt when exposed to heat. Most importantly, it manages moisture gradually, reducing that pesky internal condensation that soaks insulation overnight. Now, canvas, usually cotton duck, served as a ground barrier and outer shell. It blocked wind, resisted abrasion from rubble and stone, and could be waxed or oiled to shed rain. These materials, I must say, were heavy, but weight was really secondary to function. A soldier could drag a wool and canvas bedroll across rubble, through mud or over frozen ground, without destroying it. If torn, it could be stitched. If soaked, it could be dried and reused indefinitely. So, how did soldiers actually sleep on active fronts? Well, World War field manuals, interestingly enough, placed far more emphasis on ground preparation than on bedding itself. Soldiers were taught that the ground was, in fact, their greatest enemy. Heat loss through contact could kill faster than cold air ever could. Before unrolling a blanket, troops would scrape snow down to the packed layers or lay branches, straw, sandbags, spare uniforms, or even ammunition crates beneath them. The canvas went down first, forming a barrier against moisture. The wool blanket was folded or wrapped around the body rather than zipped, you know. This allowed quick exits under fire and adjustable ventilation to manage sweat. Boots were often kept on or placed inside the roll to prevent freezing solid. In heavy rain, the canvas could be wrapped over the top, forming a crude bivouac. And in extreme cold, an additional blanket was layered on top, rather than relying on a thicker single insulation. This system required knowledge rather than precision manufacturing. Soldiers who understood heat loss, airflow, and moisture control, well, they slept better than those who relied on issued gear alone. Why did these systems endure through years of continuous warfare? Well, World War equipment was really designed for attrition. Wool fibres, you see, rebound after compression. Canvas, on the other hand, tolerates years of abuse. Neither one depends on trapped air chambers or, delicate construction. Even after months of use, these bedrolls still functioned. Many surviving examples from the 1940s remain usable today with only minimal restoration. By contrast, modern sleeping bags often fail invisibly. Insulation shifts, loft degrades, and synthetic fibres break down over time. Once compromised, performance drops permanently. World War militaries accepted bulk and weight in exchange for equipment that still worked after prolonged neglect, freezing, soaking, and mechanical stress. What can modern survivalists learn from World War sleep doctrine? The lesson is not to abandon modern gear entirely, but to, rethink priorities. For vehicle kits, static retreats, long-term emergency storage, or wet-cold environments, wool and canvas remain unmatched. A simple blanket and ground sheet will outlast most budget sleeping bags and continue working under conditions that defeat high-tech materials. The wartime approach also emphasizes system thinking. Every component has, multiple uses. A blanket becomes insulation, clothing, padding, or shelter. A canvas sheet becomes ground cover, rain protection, or concealment. Nothing exists for a single purpose, and nothing fails catastrophically. Why World War survival methods still matter today? World War soldiers could not quit the field when conditions deteriorated. Their equipment reflected that reality. Modern gear often assumes rescue, resupply, or retreat. Wartime survival systems assumed none of those things. That mindset, more than any specific item, is the real lesson worth preserving. Understanding how soldiers survived nights in trenches, forest ruins and deserts without modern comforts reshapes how we think about preparedness today. Simple materials, intelligently used, still outperform fragile technology when conditions turn hostile. If you value deep research, hard lessons, and survival knowledge forged under real pressure, make sure you subscribe to Warfront Survival. Share this with fellow history buffs and preparedness-minded viewers who care about what actually worked when failure meant death. This channel exists to preserve fieldcraft that history already proved under fire.